Malcontent News is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with three key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live, as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent. Good evening, malcontents. I am David the Malcontent. Today is Monday, April 5th, 2021, and it is time for another episode of the Malcontentment Happy Hour. We're so glad that you're joining us tonight. Let me pull in my amazing co-host, Jennifer Smith. Jennifer, how are you doing this evening?
I am doing about as well as when I saw you about an hour ago, I think, 6 o'clock.
Yes.
So I'm decent. How are you?
I'm doing well. I know that we've got a great show lined up. One of my favorite shows, Jennifer, because we have a lot of in-house content tonight. We've got some good topics. We've got some not so good topics, but I'm always excited when we have a lot of in-house content and we have our independent journalism mojo going, and we certainly do tonight.
Yes, we do. And I think we have a lot of that coming up. I'm pretty excited about the things we have moving forward.
I'm very excited too. We definitely have a lot of stuff lined up. And with that, why don't we just jump right into it? And why don't we get the land acknowledgement going?
All right.
Malcontent News is a team of...
Malcontent News comes to you from Seattle, Washington, the occupied homelands of Coast Salish peoples. We are grateful to live as work as guests on these lands, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. This land acknowledgement is but one small gesture in the ongoing process of working toward repairing and sustaining relations with Coast Salish lands, waters, peoples, and their other than human kin.
Jennifer, thank you so much for that. This is the part of the program where we remind you that one of the easiest ways to support independent media is very simply to share this stream. If you're watching on Facebook, you can go ahead and share. If you're on YouTube or Twitch, you can go ahead and share. If you're on Twitter, you can go ahead and retweet us out. It is one of the easiest ways to amplify the volume for Black, Indigenous, persons of colors, the LGBTQIA+ community, and the independent journalists that support them. And with that, we really thank you for your support. Also like to remind you at this time, spam those hearts. Go ahead and spam those hearts. Play around with the Facebook algorithm and the Twitter algorithm. Apparently, you can still do hearts on Twitter. When you do that, you help amplify the volume. If you're not feeling very hearty, you can always go ahead and give us a like. Jennifer, before we get into our first story, we have a story zero tonight. We have breaking news out of Arkansas. Republican Governor Asa Hutchinson vetoed the Arkansas anti-trans bill that was called the SAFE Act, which, gross, Save Adolescents from Experimentation Act. Basically, it would make it illegal for anybody under 18 in the state of Arkansas to start a gender reassignment journey. The governor vetoed that a couple of hours ago.
That was a little shocking when you said Republican and transgender and it wasn't a negative outcome. So I'm curious as to what specifically made him veto that bill.
So what he had to say about it, he told reporters that it would set new standards of legislative interference for physicians and parents as they deal with some of the most complex and sensitive matters involving young people. He also called it a vast government overreach.
Wow. For a party that spends so much of its time trying to regulate women's bodies, this is a dramatic kind of shift in course, ideologically speaking. The part that doesn't surprise me is the resistance to government overreach, but the rest is a pretty big kind of shocker coming from a GOP governor in a very red state.
Multiple medical organizations spoke out against this particular measure. Arkansas, not exactly enlightened in the issue of transgender rights. They did ban transgender youth in youth sports. They are one of a handful of states. There are many states with legislation. They're one of 4 states that have actually passed those measures. The bad news out of Arkansas, the bill passed overwhelmingly through the Arkansas House and the Arkansas Senate with a very wide veto-proof majority. No word if the House and Senate will take up the measure to override the veto.
See, that's where the catch comes in then. Like, he was safe to say, hey, I can veto this because of this overreach, because it deals with these complicated issues, knowing that there's a potential of like this veto-proof majority implementing this bill anyway, right?
Absolutely. And we'll have to see what happens there in Arkansas. And with that, Jennifer, I want to go ahead and move us into our first story tonight.
Okay.
Our first story takes us 30 miles north of Seattle to the community of Marysville. Marysville has transformed in the last 20 years from the Strawberry City, a sleepy town best known for being next to the Tulalip Casino, Reservation, the casino, and a large outlet mall. Today, it is very much a bedroom community for Seattle and has swollen to 65,000 residents. It is a community that has always dealt with some degree of racial tension, but that racial tension has spilt over. There were a series of death threats that have been made by students and relatives of the students directly to Black and minority students in the school at Pilchuck High School in Marysville. And Marysville Pilchuck High School is no stranger to violence, the site of a mass shooting incident in 2014, and then a site of a mass brawl that required a very large police response and the school to be closed in 2018. There is outrage in the community because there has not been enough action taken. If anything, there is a sense among the Black community that they're trying just to sweep this under the rug. On Saturday, JJ Frank, one of the impacted parents whose daughter received direct death threats, held a press conference, and we were there with our cameras. I want to preface before we roll this first clip, there is sensitive language. We have beeped it out. Some people are going to find this very hard to watch. If you are a white ally, I would say this is incredibly important to watch. Jennifer, with that caveat, I'm going to roll the clip and then we can unpack it a little bit.
Okay.
I'm here in the capacity as of a father. So any of you parents out there, I hope that you can connect with me. We have to make a statement today that I'm hearing that these students that made these death threats said it was just a joke. When another student threatens another student's life and says that they want to kill him, that is not a joke. And when another student threatens another student's life, that threatens all of our children's lives. Let us not turn a blind eye because these were black students and minority students that our lives are any less. Black lives do matter. In December of 2020, in a leadership class, they were in a breakout Zoom class, unsupervised. And they started talking about, we want to kill all black people. They said, what about that sister, Gianna? They said, yeah, we want to kill that Gianna. This is in the police report. You can get it with the public disclosure request. It's in the report. They said that they wanted to kill my daughter, my 15-year-old daughter. I want to kill that nigger Gianna. And you're going to try to tell me that's a joke? The prosecuting attorney's office said, we did not press charges because the family did not want to, and we did a diversion plan with these two students that were having this conversation about killing black people and killing and killing my daughter, Gianna. With all in light of what's happening in our nation, we cannot take a death threat as a joke. Why is it so hard for the Marysville School District to understand our pain? That's why we are demanding the resignation of Jason Thomas, Lori Knudsen, and Rod Merrill and the consortium consultants. We're demanding that. You have failed at your most important responsibility, to keep the classroom safe and to protect the learning environment.
Jennifer, we blurred that Snapchat image because we would probably get knocked off the air, ironically, if we showed it for sharing race, even though for sharing hate against race, even though we're trying to shine a flashlight on it. And Jennifer, as you know, as our audience knows, you see this stuff all over right-wing media and in right-wing social, and it just gets a pass. But if you try to put a flashlight on it, anybody that tries to put a flashlight on it gets the takedown.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Man, could you imagine like having somebody make those kinds of threats against your child and then just have it swept under the rug like it doesn't even matter? There's a couple of things at play here. One, the failure to address like rampant racism and threats of violence against students of color, but also the clear limitations of remote schooling and education. Because Zoom rooms, like I teach college history, I don't do in-person lectures. My lectures are asynchronous, so I upload them, and so we don't have that problem. But I've been in spaces where I've had to organize and try to monitor multiple people across that platform. And there is like limitations to being able to do that. So that's one thing. But the first and foremost, the biggest thing is that they basically just let a group of teenagers basically get away with threatening to murder another child. So where are that child's rights?
And not only that, they felt comfortable enough doing it in a school setting in a Zoom meeting where this stuff is recorded, this stuff is shareable, this stuff. So if this is going on in that environment,
Yeah.
then what's the conversation around the kitchen table? And in this day and age, Jennifer, for the Marysville School District and the Snohomish County Prosecutor's Office to go, well, we did a threat assessment. They were light threat. You know, if it were indigenous students in Marysville saying they were going to kill white students, would they get the same hall pass? And we know the answer. And I use indigenous students as an example because there's a large indigenous population up in Marysville that goes into that school system.
Well, yeah, because it's right on the edge of the periphery of the lands belonging to the Tulalip Nation.
Right.
So, yeah, I couldn't even imagine if that were the scenario. Like, my God, look at Wounded Knee back in the 1890s. That was the big fear, is that the Native people were engaged in the ghost dance to kill off white people. And look how that, panned out. But again, it's just that failure to address that systemic racism. If they were that comfortable having that conversation in that particular space, how many times have they had that conversation before and it's not been reported?
Yes. And the situation, everything you saw in that video is talking about what happened in December. The end that shows that blurred out picture is from late January. And there is another investigation. We have the story up on our website for that. The Snohomish County Sheriff's Department in that case has referred to Snohomish County prosecutors hate crime charges against the 20-year-old who is currently not identified who sent that picture. The story, Jennifer, is because it was sent from the same phone and the same email address as one of the students in the December Zoom call. And that 16-year-old student said, I didn't do it. My 20-year-old relative grabbed my phone and they did it as a joke. That relative is the child, an adult child, but the child of a Marysville police officer.
I think we need to go back to a couple of things, like white men of a particular age are, statistically the most likely to commit violent crimes. You have a minor, a BIPOC minor being threatened by a member of this demographic that is statistically most likely to commit a violent crime, making repeated threats. How are you expected to feel safe sending your child back to school in person? Now, especially since this person has gotten at least acknowledged or gotten in what they might perceive to be a little bit of trouble, there's no knowing if there's not some kind of vendetta there. I mean, so why would you feel comfortable sending your child back to school? I wouldn't.
And there were over 100 parents and students that were there on Saturday. There was a very large presence, especially when you consider Marysville, the size of the community. We had an opportunity to speak with J.J. Frank one-on-one after the press conference. I'm going to go ahead and roll that clip.
And what's led up to this press conference?
Our family has been at this for 3 years, really being at the table, trying to co-create solutions and strategies. I think where it escalated to another level is when you talk about death threats of your children, we have to take death threats seriously and hold students accountable. And when we were lied to in terms of what the action was done with these students, that is unacceptable. And so that's why we decided that enough is enough and that we need to take this public.
What action do you want taken by the school district and the community?
If Jason Thompson, who's on administrative leave, and Lori Knutson, the acting deputy superintendent, Rod Merrill, and the consortium consultants do not resign, we are asking Vanessa Edwards, the school board president, and the board of directors to use their authority to terminate their employment immediately. This leadership must end, and enough is enough.
Tell us about the threat assessment process that they went through.
There is a lot of still questions around the Marysville School District's compliance in the second level death threat. We have to really make sure that you're transparent to the families who have experienced the trauma and racism and the death threats, and we still do not even know who all the members of that team are on that threat assessment team. On that threat assessment, there's supposed to be a mental health officer. There is no excuse that this student did not get a mental evaluation or mental counseling, and then we sent this student down the road to Marysville Getchell, and that was unacceptable. They are not protecting the classroom, they're not protecting the learning environment, and that's why this leadership team must go. Our families have been grieving. Our pain and suffering has just been all relived when you can't get a district to look at us as human beings, to look at us with empathy and compassion. We are the families who have been victimized. Why do I have to have a press release and a press conference for the school district to hear? I believe that the Marysville Tulalip communities are going to speak out and stand out against racism, and we will not rest until we get justice.
I really do hope that they speak out against racism, Jennifer. I went up to the Marysville School District website. They have a declaration up there on diversity and discrimination. And at least for right now, they're not living up to the standards that they have on their website. I will add, we did reach out to the school district. We reached out to the sheriff. But it was a holiday weekend, and like basically every other media organization, nobody heard back. Marysville did do a press release. Marysville Police has done a press release. And we will just continue to monitor this story to see if justice is served.
Yeah, I hope it is, because I can't imagine him wanting to send his daughter or any of those families that have been terrorized in that way and have their children's lives threatened and not taken seriously, how they would feel comfortable sending their children back to school. Because I know that's for some school districts, Seattle included, that's supposed to happen next week. And I'd be damned if I'd be sending my kid to school that way. Like, no way. And have to worry about her safety, like constantly while she's at school, and nobody taking those threats against her seriously. That's absolutely appalling and disgusting. And I'm sorry, those diversity statements that they put up on websites across public schools, K-12 in Seattle, are no different than, my ultra white, wealthy Laurelhurst neighbors that I happen to live on the periphery of the neighborhood, putting those, we welcome everybody sign here, so they feel like they're fitting in with the progressive shit. It's all just lip service.
I think the word is performative.
Yeah.
We'll continue to follow this story, and I think we're going to break for a little pause for the cause.
Okay.
Hi, Malcontents. I'm David, the Malcontent, and I'd like to talk to you for a moment about supporting independent media. When you support us, you help us bring the before, during, and after. You help us defend the First Amendment. You help us amplify BIPOC and LGBTQIA voices, and you help us hold leaderships at a local, state, and federal level accountable. None of this would be possible without support by viewers just like you. When you become a patron for as little as $5 a month, you help buy technology, safety equipment, and help cover travel expenses so that we can continue to bring you news that you trust. If you can't become a patron, you can do a one-time donation on Venmo, and your dollars will go to the exact same causes. With your continued support, we can continue to amplify BIPOC and LGBTQIA voices while showing the truth on what is happening in the world around us. Once again, thank you. And I really can't stress enough that your generosity is what literally keeps the lights on here as I point around at the studio lights. We love our patrons. We thank you for your support. On a Venmo, $5 literally keeps our Adobe Spark account paid for a month. So even if you just have a few dollars to throw in the tip jar, those dollars go very, very far. You would actually be surprised. And with that, we're going to go ahead and roll into our second story for the night. Jennifer, you bring us this story tonight of Pandia Health and Dr. Sophia Yen, MD.
Yeah, so Sophia Yen is the co-founder and CEO of Pandia Health, and she's also co-founder of a nonprofit organization called She Heroes. But Pandia Health just came into the state of Washington, and you can actually access birth control via mail. She sends, candy with it, some advice. You can actually do telemedicine as well if you don't have a doctor or insurance for a small fee. It's a really wonderful way for women to have more access to birth control and the ability to control their reproductive health and their body. And so I know we have an excerpt of the interview that I did with her, and why don't we go ahead and play that? Hello, malcontents. This is Jennifer, and I'm here today with Dr. Sophia Yen, who is the co-founder and CEO of Pandia Health. Thank you for being with us today, Dr. Yen. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
So can you tell us a little more about the services Pandia Health offers?
Pandia Health is the end-to-end solution for birth control, from an online doctor's visit to birth control delivered to your door. And as the only women-founded, women-led, doctor-led company in this space, we're now launched in Washington, and you can use our expert doctors for just $20 once a year, and you have access for the entire year for any follow-up questions, as much follow-ups as you want. And if you're new to our system, we'll follow up in 8 weeks with a questionnaire. No insurance, no problem. We have cash options. Most birth control pills are generic, 95% of them. And so it's $15 per pack of pills, less than 50 cents a day for your birth control if you don't have insurance. But thank you, Affordable Care Act. If you do have insurance, no copay, no deductible.
So speaking about the Affordable Care Act, they've recently, with the new COVID bill, raised the cap for the ACA. And so we've seen in the last few years, especially, diminishing efforts to diminish women's rights. How do you think that, your services and the ACA cap and opening up like options for telemedicine to people that might otherwise have it actually enhance or strengthen women's reproductive rights?
So the whole point of creating this company was to make women's lives better. Medicine is based on a Caucasian female model, or actually it's usually a 70-kilo white male, but I don't know what they use for birth control, but it wasn't a person of color. And so we are looking and asking our customers to self-report their ethnicity so we can correlate it with side effects, see which birth control works best so that the next woman that has this ethnicity, this profile, this history, we can offer her the best birth control so she doesn't have to try 3 different pills until she finds the one she wants. Know that there's 40 different birth control pills. If you didn't like this one pill, there's 39 different other ones. More importantly, there's 8 progesterones. So if you don't like one, note what progesterone it is, note what dose it is, because sometimes there's a high dose and a low dose, and the low dose works fine. It's just a high dose that gives you side effects. Tell that to your doctor. Take a picture of it or write it down. And then number 3, if your body mass index is 26 or greater, so everybody with a uterus, punch it in the computer right now, body mass index. If it's 26 or greater, Plan B and its generics do not work.
That's a really good point, because I actually didn't know that Plan B was ineffective beyond a certain BMI until like last year.
We bring birth control to wherever you have internet and a mailbox. And I like to say, nor rain, nor sleet, nor snow is going to block our birth control. You can imagine in rural parts of the country where the nearest doctor is 2 or 3 hours away. Or I have one friend, her son and his fiance live on top of a mountain, and they have to drive 1 or 2 hours to get down to the local pharmacy. That this is a problem with access. And so we can get her medication if and when she needs it. The other part is confidentiality. So you can imagine if we walk into a pharmacy, one, the pharmacist could choose to slut shame you. Hey, Sophia, here again for birth control. And then Chatty Nancy goes and tells the entire neighborhood. We can deliver to all 50 states. We currently can prescribe in 10 states. And so we're promoting kind of birth control tourism. If you happen to be in Seattle at the airport, you can fill out the questionnaire, and then we can deliver it to Kansas or Arkansas or whatever state, just as long as you're physically in one of the 10 states we serve. When you fill out the questionnaire, legally, we can take care of you. But once you leave that state, we can't write the prescription, but we can absolutely deliver it.
You are a completely women-led, women founded. How many women doctors do you actually have working in Pandia Health now?
Yeah, so as we go state to state and as we expand, it's changing every day. Last count, I believe we have 10 physicians. One is a male, but he is passionate, OB-GYN, reproductive health, academic. We list the first and the last name of all our physicians. We give you their bio and we tell you why they're passionate about making women's lives better. We also have Pandia Health /social good. So if unfortunately COVID has taken away your insurance and you can't afford it and you can't afford 50 cents a day to cover your birth control or $20 once a year for the doctor's visit, you can apply to our birth control fund. And if you have money, you can donate to the birth control fund and take a tax deduction. So pay it forward or pay it back, whatever. If you want to help women who can't afford birth control, get birth control, please donate to the Pandia Health Birth Control Fund. It's a C3, so it's tax deductible.
I'm so glad that you guys are expanding into Washington. You know, we've seen the recent closure of some Planned Parenthoods, and Planned Parenthoods have been so important in distributing birth control pills. I also see that you are the co-founder of a nonprofit organization called She Heroes. Can you talk a little bit about that for us?
Today, when we Google woman whatever, there should be an excited woman talking about being a doctor, being a CEO, being an entrepreneur, being whatever. And so She Heroes is free online videos targeting 3rd to 8th graders. When you picture a CEO, do you picture woman, man, or both? We even led with woman. Then we said judge. Then we said Supreme Court. Then we said engineer. Then we said all sorts of different jobs. And even in liberal Silicon Valley, came out totally sexist. Then we showed one video of an African-American surgeon power woman. And then we resurveyed. And all of the attitudes switched more egalitarian. And what's more important is girls are getting the she hero, she hero, she hero. But boys need to see these videos too, to realize that their CEO may be a woman. Their colleague at least will be a woman. She Heroes benefits boys and girls. And we saw there was a greater move in the boys because the girls had already been a little bit empowered, but the boys needed to see it to realize that it could happen.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Again, we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to speak with us and tell us about Pandia Health.
Thank you so much for having me, and check us out on social media. We have YouTube educational videos. We have a blog. We have frequently asked questions. We're on Instagram. Any question you have about the birth control pill, patch, ring, check us out.
Yeah, so she brought up some really great points that I think a lot of people might not be aware of, women especially, and that is the BMI limitation on Plan B. So if we're talking about a 26 BMI, if you're 5'4" and 155 pounds or above, and that's a relatively small person, you're above or 26 BMI or above, and so Plan B might not work for you. So it's interesting how these things are made and marketed without really letting people know that if you're beyond this particular size or BMI, that it's not as effective. She did tell us that there is another option called Ella, that if you are beyond the 26 BMI, is an option for you and is far more effective than the Plan B. So she did have some, I hope more people watch the full interview when we get it posted on the website, because she had some really important information in that respect.
Yeah, it was a very timely interview too, Jennifer, because Planned Parenthood announced that they were closing 3 facilities in Western Washington, First Hill in Seattle, one in Kent, and one in Shelton. And the reason they were having to do these closures is Medicaid and Medicare reimbursements had been slashed so far down that these 3 facilities can't basically afford to operate anymore. And this is a great alternative for people. One of the things, certainly I've never taken birth control, but one of the things that did resonate to me as somebody that takes prescriptions and has gone through this frustration of modern medicine of, hey, I'm going on vacation and I need to refill this because I'm not going to be here in the winter. No, you can't, because your insurance won't cover it. You've got to do it. You know, but that is inconvenient and it doesn't work for me. And Dr. Yen talked about that this was one of the #1 reasons that women miss doses on birth control.
Yeah, and Washington, luckily, is one of the states that allows for a year of birth control to be prescribed at a time, which is great. But we're still talking about accessibility. And if you don't have insurance, if you don't have Medicaid, here is an option where you can have a telemedicine visit for $20 and get the subscription for the birth control that you need. She said the only thing that they really require, aside from like the questionnaire that you fill out, is that you have a recent blood pressure reading. And you can do that at a grocery store, a pharmacy. She said she really likes going to the fire department. They'll take your blood pressure for you. You just have to kind of sit and rest for 5 minutes. So they're trying to make it as easy as possible for women to have access to birth control and bodily autonomy.
It's a shame that we have to have this conversation in 21st century America, but women's reproductive rights continues to be a hot button topic. And we are fortunate to live in a state like Washington State, where it's not the hot button topic that it is in other parts of the country. Jennifer, thank you so much for bringing us that story. I think we're getting ready to move on to story number 3 after a little pause for the cause.
All right.
Black Coffee is a hub for communities and a hub for meeting people, making friends, and understanding.
What Black Coffee is to me is a place to actually call home, a place where Black youth will feel welcomed, where Black families will come and feel like they're at home.
What we're trying to build is more than just coffee. Community is something that we do naturally. We know who's in the community, we know what the deficits are, and we're trying to fix that. We want to bring people together.
My hope is that the phrase grounded in excellence shows up everywhere and that it becomes a movement.
I'm looking forward to hanging out at Black Coffee with my friends and feeling safe.
Black Coffee to me means opportunity for people like me and my other friends and family to come here and do homework safely and hang out and stuff like that.
That is happening. It is happening.
Black Coffee is located in Shoreline, Washington on Highway 99 between 170th and 180th. I always say, check their website or Facebook page. Their hours wiggle a little bit from week to week sometimes. They have amazing coffee. They have amazing merch. And Jennifer, the show wouldn't be complete without a shameless plug for potato scones.
I know, I was going to yell, get the potato scone, but I figured, that's your thing, and I didn't want to, step away.
Why don't we go ahead and roll into story number 3?
Okay.
Jennifer, I'll be sure we'll fire the graphics person for that day 4 because we're actually into week 2. It is day 6 of the trial. But I will be sure to show our graphics person the door at the end of the show. I know that you're bringing us this story tonight, so I will turn it over to you.
It's not really a story, but more of a recap of today's events. If you guys didn't have the opportunity to watch or couldn't stomach it, don't worry. I watched it for you, and I was nauseated the entire time. So there's some really pivotal testimony that happened today. Of course, this is the beginning of week 2, day 6 of the trial. And so we have the doctor that attempted to treat George Floyd at the hospital, who testified that George Floyd had been in cardiac arrest for at least 30 minutes by the time he reached the hospital. They finally called his death at 60 minutes. They tried to revive him for 30 minutes to no avail. And so the prosecutor asked him what what the cause of death was. They were like, do you think it was drugs? And they're like, no, he didn't show any sign of kind of agitation that you would expect with drugs. Of course, he was in cardiac arrest the entire time. But they had no reason to believe that had anything to do with anything he had taken, but rather the probable cause was what they call hypoxia due to asphyxiation, which was basically the result of having someone hold their knee on his neck for 9 minutes, Derek Chauvin. So this was a really fundamental piece of testimony here. We also had the Minneapolis police chief testify, and he testified, much to the chagrin of the defense attorney, that this was not a standard restraint technique, that he felt this was far too excessive. The defense attorney tried to show a 5-second clip right when the EMTs had arrived, where Chauvin had actually moved his knee off of George Floyd's neck down to his shoulder blade area, and then tried to use that as a way in which to challenge the fact that Derek Chauvin had his knee on George Floyd's neck for that particular amount of time. But the police chief came back and said this was the only time that he'd actually seen the movement from the neck to the shoulder blade region was when the EMTs had arrived. He also testified, which made me super, super nauseous, that about 7 minutes or so into the video, he actually believed George Floyd to be dead. He didn't know if he was any longer alive. And that was 2+ minutes before Derek Chauvin actually removed his knee from his neck. They also got testimony from one of the inspectors, who's actually an instructor for the training for Minneapolis, the different kinds of training that they go through yearly, I believe, annual training. And restraint is one of them, because restraint was one of the big topics. There was 3 hours of testimony from the police chief. And so what really got me too in that 3 hours of testimony is what they call the MRT, and it's like the maximum restraint technique. And so what they were talking about was hobbling, and it's basically honestly, hobbling is what they do to restrain livestock. So it's basically restraining hands and then pulling an ankle up to like the waist area and restraining that. They talked about that as a maximum restraint technique, the challenges of using the maximum restraint technique in the moment. The police chief testified that this was not, to his understanding, an approved restraint technique. The neck, they were allowed to use an arm, was kind of his understanding, but never a knee. And so he didn't understand what kind of restraint technique this was. Neither did the inspector. So this was a big point of contestation. But also when the inspector who does the training came up and was like, I don't even know what kind of technique he was attempting to use here. This is not something we teach. He basically challenged her as an educator, saying, well, maybe you were using outdated material, because they were forced to turn over, I think, around 30,000 pages of educational material. So there was, it's a necessary thing to watch because it is so important, but it's so disturbing. I can't imagine even having to witness that. The testimony is just absolutely disturbing. And I was like sick for a majority of the day. It's that bad. So I don't know what's going to come of this. During the mid-afternoon break, they actually had like a police conference talking about what's kind of security they have in place to prevent violent protests, because there's been a lot of what they consider to be peaceful protests. And so they want to keep them peaceful so the court can get through and do its job. But they're talking about bringing in potentially reinforcements as the trial nears an end. And it's just concerning to listen to the analysis of the trial, because it's so clear that he murdered this man, that Derek Chauvin is a murderer and he murdered George Floyd. But there are so many technicalities, and it only takes one juror to say, well, reasonable doubt, I don't believe he actually intended to kill him. Because what the defense is doing right now is trying to build a case that, yeah, maybe what he did was unethical, but it wasn't criminal.
Yeah, and that's what I've said. All it takes is one juror to have reasonable doubt. and Derek Chauvin's going to walk. Jennifer, we have a clip of the testimony from the police chief. Do we want to go ahead? You've got a great summary, and thank you so much. Do you want us to roll that clip for you?
Yeah, if you want to. Sorry, I totally forgot about those. I was like so in.
No.
Say.
We'll go ahead and roll the clip.
Okay.
Do you believe that the defendant followed departmental policy 5-304 regarding de-escalation?
I absolutely do not agree with that.
And how so?
That action is not de-escalation. And when we talk about the framework of our sanctity of life, and when we talk about the principles and values that we have, that action goes contrary to what we're taught.
As you reflect on Exhibit 17, I must ask you, is this a trained Minneapolis Police Department defensive tactics technique?
It is not.
Well, we read the departmental policy on neck restraints. Is this a neck restraint?
The conscious neck restraint by policy mentions light to moderate pressure. When I look at Exhibit 17, and when I look at the facial expression of Mr. Floyd, that does not appear in any way, shape, or form that is light to moderate pressure.
So is it your belief then that this particular form of restraint, if that's what we'll call it, in fact violates departmental policy?
I absolutely agree that violates our policy.
It's really damning testimony.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there, yeah, like I said, he sat for 3 hours, and they're basically got into a lot of disputes over what constitutes excessive force and restraint in the moment. He also tried the defense attorney, Eric, I can't remember his last name. I don't really care to be quite honest. He was basically trying to make a case too that the crowd was creating a crisis, and that they felt that the crisis was larger than it actually was. It was actually really disgusting. That was the point in time when I was messaging you asking how can he live with himself. So yeah, there was some, it's so very difficult to listen to. Again, it's necessary. I mean, this is a big moment, but all of this is, it's very difficult to stomach. And that picture, I mean, he doesn't even look like remotely, I don't know, remorseful or disturbed or anything about the fact that he is pressing all of his weight, and he is not a small man, on somebody's neck with his knee. A restrained man to boot.
It started a movement around the world, protests in 650 U.S. cities.
Yeah.
That continues today in many locations. We'll do another update, Jennifer, on Wednesday.
Okay.
And with that, we'll do a little pause for the cause, and we'll go into our next story. Our next story takes us to Bessemer, Alabama, where we will be finding out, likely this week, likely any moment, on the decision that the employees have made on whether to unionize at the Amazon fulfillment there. There has been an ongoing battle for months in the unionization of that. And what's starting to come out, Jennifer, over the last 4 or 5 weeks is, we'll put it gently, questionable tactics that Amazon has been using to break the back of the unionization effort there. want to go ahead and roll a first clip, and then we can unpack that a little bit.
Okay.
Even when they go use the restroom and close the door behind them, they have something up there saying vote no against the union.
Amazon actually had the city to come out there and recalibrate the red lights so they can stop and chat with us.
They are coming and stopping us from working, doing our jobs, to basically ram the information in our heads about why we shouldn't have a union.
The kind of union bust that I've been seeing from Amazon has been very far-fetched.
I want to say around the first week in November, that's about the time they hired their union busters to try to disrupt everything, to try to confuse disinformation, et cetera, et cetera.
I think they pretty much scared because don't nobody want to lose their job.
Why are we being punished for trying to seek help? We are supposed to seek help when we feel like we are being mistreated.
Amazon actually had the city to come out there and recalibrate the red lights.
There was a truck across the field that had been sitting there for about 2 hours. And so we went over to him and he said, no guys, I'm just here to do a traffic study. Right there at our red light where we stand. And then they stayed there for the rest of that day. And from that day forward, those red lights were completely different.
And the reason they do that is when they come down the exit, that red light will turn green. And they have to keep going. So they can't stop and chat with them.
A person might pull up and say, hey, can you answer this quick question for me? By the time she gets that out of her mouth, the light has changed green that quick.
Caused an accident since we've been out there. Big Mike almost got hit.
2 cars crashed and jumped up on the block where I was standing at. I had to literally jump off the block, get back up and try to help the people to make sure they was okay. One young lady, whole front end of the car was off, so I was just luckily, by the grace of God, that I got out the way.
Every time we go to the bathroom in your stall, in the men's bathroom, as soon as you go to the stall, you got an anti-union flyer right there in front of you. You got flyers in the break room. You got when you walking in and walking out, you got big banners saying early vote, vote no.
It really touched me in a way when they started having the classroom teachings about why we shouldn't have a union, because as a part of leadership, I didn't get the proper training that I needed.
They're taking people to numerous meetings a day.
Some of the younger people are kind of confused. They're afraid because Amazon told them in the meeting that if you get the union, your benefits will be taken away. It's just not true.
So, Amazon is plagued with that system.
They're scared.
And, they're not scared of us. They're scared of the people coming together and empowering yourself and finally saying enough is enough.
Jennifer, it seems we have a theme in the show tonight, which is enough is enough. We've actually heard that words in 3 different stories tonight.
Yeah, that's disgusting. Talk about like gaslighting, manipulative, trying to indoctrinate your employees to believe that the union can't, but you can. I got 5 words, people. Seize the means of production. There we go.
So one of the things that jumps out at me is if we look at the automotive industry, and the automotive industry move into the southern states, and we have a lot of data on that now, and the automotive industry promised to bring good paying jobs, better benefits, to lift up areas that were economically depressed. And they got huge tax incentives that ironically the employees then have to fill in the holes on to open up auto manufacturing production in these southern states. And starting pay compared to UAW union roles might start at $16, $17, $18 an hour. But when we look at the data over 2 decades, Jennifer, the poverty rates, the home ownership rates, the life expectancy rates, the education rates, the needles haven't moved because they're paying the workers just enough. And when you compete against small mom and pop manufacturing operations or agricultural operations, yes, the pay is better. But is the pay actually better to lift these workers into the middle class of America? And the data plays out that the answer is absolutely no.
No, it's not. And it's just another form of worker exploitation by U.S. corporations. I mean, it's like the maquiladoras that sit on the U.S.-Mexico border where these U.S. companies go and exploit, the labor of Mexican people because they know that they need the money, but basically pay them shit wages because they can. And then they get to, bring the product back into the United States and sell it and make bank off it because capitalism.
Yes, exactly. And then Amazon started running some ads, and we have an ad. It's a short ad. I'm going to go ahead and run it. And then I'm going to talk about, Jennifer, where they actually ran this ad.
We at the Birmingham team have a great leadership. We really don't need anyone coming in and telling us what they want to give us, because basically we have everything we need here. Always wanted to work for Amazon. This is the only place I've seen that have benefits from day one. There's no waiting period. You got chances to advance.
Vote no for the union?
I will vote no.
It's not needed.
Vote no, we can do it without the dues.
And one of the things that jumps out at me in that video is this is the first place I have ever worked where you got benefits on the first day. I have never worked at anywhere in my life, Jennifer. Going back to a burger flipper back in my Gen X days at McDonald's where I didn't get benefits on the first day.
That was so alarming. Oh my, did she not look coerced?
It totally looks like a hostage video, and there are a ton of videos on TikTok that are making fun of that commercial. On the subject of channels like TikTok and social media, Amazon started running that ad on Twitch, which is, that's right, owned by Amazon. And then when they were called out for it, Amazon said, whoops, we actually didn't mean to run that on Twitch. We're sorry. And they pulled that ad back down. Full disclosure, I worked at Amazon for almost a year. I am fully out of all my clauses and everything else attached to that. They knew they were running those ads on Twitch. There was no oops there. The only oops is they got called out for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that is like, wow. That video was disturbing.
Well, we're just going to dig through another rock layer as we keep going here, Jennifer, because there is apparently pee in the bottle gate that is going on. There were reports that workers, not just their truck drivers and delivery drivers, but that people in the fulfillment centers wouldn't take their breaks because they would count against them if they did. And there's been widespread reports of this through the Amazon fulfillment network going on for 3 years. So people would pee in a bottle. Well, Amazon a week ago lit up someone on social media, I believe a reporter. They say, you don't believe these stories. They can't possibly be true. And then Amazon had to walk it all back. Let me roll the clip.
Yes, this is all about, obviously, there's the union fight. But what's really interesting is this could be such a big backlash against Jeff Bezos himself, because he's the one who was being very aggressive, particularly with these Twitter feeds, saying that the company needed to be more aggressive. But I also think that, it's such an issue because the union, I mean, the workers are really looking for better working conditions. And the fact that Amazon would get out there and actually put the focus and make these sort of snarky Twitter feeds about, people don't pee in bottles, which obviously was incorrect, has been a real issue for them, because it seems like they're being very dismissive of worker concerns. Whereas, if the issue were racism, if it were sexism, they would have some sensitivity. They would say, oh, we're looking at this issue. They wouldn't be dismissive. It really makes them look hard-hearted.
Hard-hearted. That's an interesting way to describe the whole pee in the bottle issue. And I want to reiterate, it's really important for our audience. When we're talking about peeing in the bottle, it isn't just the truck drivers. It is the people in the fulfillment centers that are peeing in bottles. And Jennifer, I will say, particularly in the age of COVID, if you are out and about, public toilet access has been a flipping nightmare. I have had multiple occasions when I was out in the field back in the Chaz Chop days and at other protests where 8-10 hours, and I literally ran to the house because I was like, as I got into the driveway, because I'm like 30 seconds away from embarrassing myself. I get this is an issue in the driver's space, but Amazon, in their response and walking it back, tried to conflate this as, well, this is an industry issue, and we know that our delivery drivers have talked about this. It's gross. The whole thing is gross.
Yeah. And then to have like the audacity to minimize it, and then to put out these videos and have all this going on. Jeff Bezos, like we joke about Jeff Bezos's balls all the time being in Seattle. He's got some pretty big fucking balls for a little short bald dude. I'm going to say that right now. But again, this just goes back to capitalism, worker exploitation, and all of the things that come along with it, and these big corporations holding so much power. So I'm going to say it one more time, people. Seize the means of production.
Here's my prediction on what's going to happen. I think that they're going to unionize. I think it'll pass with no more than by 5%. I think it'll be close. So I think it'll be like, from 51-49 to 55-45. I think that there will then be, the vote was invalid. We need to count all the votes. Let's get Sidney Powell. Let's get Rudy Giuliani. And let's get the magnifying glasses. And then I think Amazon's going to close that fulfillment center down. That's my prediction I will put on the table here tonight.
And then put a bunch of people out of work. And further, this is just so gross to me. We've had other than the Pandia health story, which was great, go women's reproductive rights, get access to the shit you need. The rest of our stories have made me feel like I need to go take a 6-hour shower.
Well, that's okay, because we can end on a funny note. In 2018, South Park season 22 did 2 episodes together that skewered Amazon and the fulfillment centers and compared them to the company store back into, say, the late 1800s into the up to about 1920 or 1925, when we started to see some real worker reform in the United States. And it's a really powerful video. I get it. Look, and I even said, I watched some a couple of weeks ago, right? I was like, they played some older South, and they're just gross. They're really gross. These are huge social commentary episodes. I would love to be able to play the company store video, but it uses the song 16 Tons by Tennessee Fort Ernie in its entirety. It's like a music video. It plays it in its entirety. Look, if you don't want to watch the episode, go onto YouTube after this show. Just do a search for South Park, Amazon, 16 Tons, or South Park, Amazon Fulfillment. It'll be one of the top things. Multiple people have cut the music video. But again, I was concerned, particularly Facebook, would go if we played the whole thing. But, Jennifer, it's like South Park predicted this, and I am going to play a little clip from the episode of Fulfillment.
Mayor, you have a visitor.
Not now, I'm having problems.
But Mayor, it's Jeff Bezos.
Okay, let him in.
Right on through here, Mr. Bezos.
Please, Mayor, have a seat.
Oh, thank you. I guess you're here because of the strike?
We had a deal, Mayor. You told me this town would be the perfect place for one of our fulfillment centers.
Jennifer's like, They so predicted the future there. If you're looking at that and you're going, where have I seen the heads like that? It's from a Star Trek episode, from the original Star Trek. They had characters that they spoke telepathically, and they had the big brains, and they acted very malevolent and arrogantly against the other smaller humans. They are two really powerful episodes about the implications of Amazon, of consumerism, and how they treat their employees, and how we as consumers behave. Jennifer, you and I were talking earlier tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you going to go?
Yeah, no, that and Comcast. We were talking about Comcast and Amazon. Yeah. What do you do?
The clock that I have to help me keep on time for the show, Amazon. 3 of these lights that are in here in the studio right now, Amazon. The tripod that the camera is on, Amazon. Most of my light stands are Amazon Basics because they're fantastic light stands, and I can get 2 for $21. So it's also like the Walmart episode that South Park did on how do you defeat Walmart? You will have to kill the heart of Walmart. And what is the heart of Walmart? Well, it's actually a mirror located in the electronics department that shows you your face. We're the heart of Amazon.
Yeah.
And I don't know how we get out of it, because our government has allowed this almost online monopoly to exist. And it is only growing larger.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Larger, exploiting more people. And, if you're right, and they do unionize and they shut that center down, it's going to put a lot of people out of work. And what is that going to do to their lives? So,
And that's part of the other issue that we face. And there's questions on, there is no question that Amazon has brought a lot of wealth into Puget Sound. But how much of that wealth is actually trickled down into the broader community? And I think we see the answer to that in the streets of Seattle.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
The last thing I want to close on is this. There may be some people watching this right now going, this is really ironic. David is here pro-union when all he does is bash police unions. Unions serve a role in representing workers so that they have a singular voice to go up against the companies. Not all unions are good. There are examples of where your unions have become corrupt and moribund and have destroyed the businesses and industries that they represented. The UAW and the state that the UAW was in from the 80s to the 90s is a great example of this. There are also unions that do tremendous work and represent their employees very, very well. And then there are unions that fall in between. And sometimes those lousy deals, like the one that we have with SPOG here in Seattle, it isn't completely SPOG's fault. Let's remember, the Seattle City Council and Seattle leadership, they signed that agreement. They didn't tell SPOG to take a walk. And now we have police officers with an average salary of $153,000 a year claiming they don't make enough money and can't live in the city, which is head-scratching in itself. In the 1950s, the United States enjoyed the highest standard of living on the planet. It was not utopia. We had problems in this country. We had racism, we had sexism on levels that aren't even close to what we have today. I get that entire picture. But you know what we did have in this country? 34% of Americans worked in a union. Pension was just given. You went to work for a company, you got a pension, you would retire from that company. Healthcare was a given. College education was free. Home ownership was seen as the path to creating material wealth, and we built the middle class to the largest one on the planet. And then Nixon became president, and equal rights among minorities was starting, and the Republican Party and the Democrat Party switched platforms, and white evangelicals and Christians wanted no part of this equality. So ironically, to help hold the BIPOC communities down, the very systems that lifted everyone into middle-class America started to get destroyed. And here we are in 2021, and the middle class is vanishing. And I'll close with this. Last year, during COVID, Jeff Bezos' personal wealth grew, or I should say, Amazon's stock grew over $1 trillion. Jeff Bezos almost increased his personal wealth by $1 billion in a year, when most Americans went backwards. It was a massive transfer of wealth.
David, that's not ending the show on a fun note.
What's that?
That didn't end the show on a fun note. You're
well,
like, oh.
I guess I took away the South Park fun note. I'm sorry, everyone.
Now you have to seem like a cowboy again.
There's a ton of background noise going on in the studio, unfortunately. There's like some cars going by really fast. I want to thank Kevin. Kevin, thank you so much for becoming a patron tonight. I also saw Jennifer, several people commenting that they're new subscribers over at Twitch. We at Jeff Bezos, thank you. There's your comedy, right? Me and Jeff Bezos, we thank you both for subscribing to us on Twitch. Hopefully, after calling out Amazon's hypocrisy, we'll still have a Twitch channel tomorrow. Yeah. I would like to remind everybody, we're going to 3 shows a week, starting this week. Our next show is on Wednesday. And on Wednesday, we're going to have an interview with Andrew Grant Houston, an interview that Jennifer did. And he is one of our candidates for mayor. Jennifer, we're getting some big names.
I know. Yeah, that was a fun interview. I really enjoyed speaking with him.
It was a fun interview, and we have other mayoral candidates that we have already interviewed that are in the hopper, and we have others that we are lining up.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm really excited about the stuff that we have forthcoming, and I hope other people are too, and they stick around to watch it.
Jennifer, thank you so much. It was a great show tonight. Thank you for bringing us that story on Pandia Health. Great story. Lots of positive comments on that. I shared a link to our news story, so you can go there. There's more information and a little more about the interview that we had up there. And again, Jennifer, thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you for everything you did to make that happen.
And I think with that, this is where I'm going to say good night, Jennifer.
Good night, David.
And good night to all our malcontents. We love you. Malcontent News is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with 3 key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live, as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent.
You fit the profile. You're the malcontent.
Nobody wants to hear the nonsensical ravings of a loudmouth malcontent.
Fuck you! You are the biggest hypocrite on the face of the planet.
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what